A first-in-the-nation executive order, one that will result in banning the sale of guns to those on government watch lists. As you all know, we passed historic gun legislation in 2013, one that has protected lives in our state. We're going to take yet another step forward here in Connecticut. We intend to prevent, by executive order, through my powers as governor, those on government watch lists from obtaining a permit to purchase a firearm in Connecticut. In our state, in order to purchase a firearm, you first need to obtain a permit from a public safety agency, during which time a thorough background check is conducted. The executive order would add an additional level of protection and require those who apply for a permit to be screened against government watch lists. That would prevent anyone on the list the ability to purchase handguns, shotguns, rifles, and ammunition. Assault weapons are already outlawed in Connecticut. I have been in touch with the White House directly on this matter, and we are working with federal authorities to gain access to their lists for this purpose. As we work with the federal government, we will determine the appropriate lists to be included, be it a no-fly list or some combination of those who should not have weapons. If approved, we will sign an executive order. We will take action. Like all Americans, I've been horrified by the recent terrorist attack in California and Paris. This should be a wake-up call for all of us. This is a moment to seize here in America. And today I'm here to say that Connecticut, we are seizing this moment. It is incumbent upon leaders at all levels of government to protect its citizenry. The Connecticut congressional delegation, Senator Murphy and Blumenthal, Representatives Larson, DeLauro, Esty, Himes, and Courtney have no doubt been advocates, but Congress has failed to act. I have previously written to Congress on this matter, but inaction is not an option, so in Connecticut we shall be acting. We took historic steps with our smart gun law several years ago. We are taking action again today. If you cannot fly due to being on a government watch list, you should not be able to purchase a firearm while on that watch list as well. This is basic common sense. The American people get it. Between 2004 and 2014, FBI data shows that people on the terrorism watch list tried to buy guns and explosives 2,233 times, and that they succeeded in more than 90% of those cases, or 2,043 times. Many Republicans nationally seem to be in favor of allowing those on watch lists to purchase guns, but denying but they are equally willing to deny women, children, and families fleeing a war-torn country entry into the United States because of a perceived danger. Let me say this, the danger of having people on watch lists buying guns in our country is far greater than any of the risks that they're talking about. The NRA and their supporters have stood in the way time and time again as we have fought for sensible gun violence prevention. These are the measures that will save lives. And on such an emotional issue, they're stalled because of advocacy rooted in twisted, irrational, and backward logic. 3 years ago, we passed some of the strictest gun control measures in the country. We are going to take further actions now. I do urge Congress to act, to follow the example of Connecticut and pass a Denying Firearms and Explosives to Dangerous Terrorist Act of 2015. And today I'm here to say that if Congress will not act, we in the states will. Once again, I want to say if approval is granted from the federal government, and we are already in those discussions, we will immediately execute an executive order. Thank you. I'll take questions on this point initially, and then I'll take other questions. What's that? We have access. We're working with federal authorities to make sure that we can have access to appropriate lists, and to do it in a way, that would not endanger their information gathering activities. So that's a point. Right now, we're working specifically through and with the White House. I think they're in contact with other agencies. Yeah, I think they're in agreement.
What's the legal basis? The state, how much discretion do the state police currently have? There are some things that, as a matter of law, if you are a felon, you must be denied the permit you use to buy. But to what extent do they have discretion on other character issues that allow you by executive order to make this correct?
We believe we have the power under executive order because what we're denying is a permit. And it's a permit process, and there's an appeal in the permit process if you're denied.
So they can go to the Board of Firearm Review.
They can go to a board, firearm review, initially perhaps an administrative appeal, and then to firearm review as well. But listen, what we're saying is if somebody's on a list and their name pops up because they're being watched for specific activity, and by the way, it may be even other and broader things, but because there's not just an exclusively a no-fly list, there are other lists that are in the system. I want to make sure people in Connecticut are as safe as possible.
What you're proposing would not,
okay, wait.
What you're proposing would not have stopped the attack in San Bernardino. And authorities said yesterday that they knew that the two had been radicalized. So how is this not a purely political move adding on to Connecticut's gun law?
Because, Max, until I think 2 weeks ago, I was unaware that people were allowed to buy weapons who were on these lists. And I was horrified by it, and I began speaking about it almost immediately. We then, later, we did begin, and I had our legal folks start to work on this particular idea. We have shared it with the White House. In the meantime, Congress took this up. They took it up, and they have not acted. And I don't think there's, with the exception of NRA-type spokesmen, I don't think there's anybody in America who thinks it makes sense to allow these folks to be buying guns in any state or in the nation. And as I watch this rhetoric in Washington about refugees, I can't stand by and have people not understand that because of the NRA activity in our country, we're required to sell weapons to people who are on these very same watch lists. It's got to stop. Somebody's got to stand up.
When did this idea, when did you come up with this, or when did you and your staff come up with this?
I came up with it last week.
All right, so now how come it didn't come up during the special session, make it a law?
Because we've been working on various things. You know, these things aren't in alignment, and there was an agreement, as you know, with legislators on financial and tax issues. That's why.
How many people on that list? May I have a question?
Okay.
How many people are on the watch list, and do we know how many people on the watch list are in Connecticut?
We have reason to believe that there are people on the watch list living in Connecticut. It's a pretty broad list. There are a number of these lists. It's not just a no-fly list or a terrorism list. There are other lists. We'll apply whatever lists are being watched by the federal government in investigating this kind of behavior. And what I'm saying is we should add that forthwith, those lists, to our background check and be in a position to deny that a person on those lists, subject to appeal, in Connecticut.
What would you do if you find out that there's someone in Connecticut on the list who has already been issued a permit?
If there's someone on the list and has a weapon, I would argue that the weapon should be removed.
Do you have any
Subject to appeal.
Do you have any concerns that people have said that you are wrongfully on this list, and there could be people who should have a gun and are being on this list wrongly?
And that's why there needs to be a vigorous appeal process. And that's why these decisions should be reviewed. That's why the commissioner's here, because she's going to have to be working on that issue. But again, I want to go back to this. 2,043 times people on one list have been permitted, and this is a specific list relating to terrorism, have been allowed to buy guns in this country. We need to change that.
Is it your understanding that people do not know they're on that list until they go to purchase an airplane ticket and people just don't know?
It's both. It's both. It's sometimes they do and sometimes they don't.
Governor, how would
Because of interviews and the like.
people have, for
And by the way, can I I'm sorry, just let me, and that's one of the reasons that we want to make sure that we coordinate our activity with as broad a cross-section of federal agencies as possible. But what I'm saying in essence is, because Congress won't act, it should not prevent a governor or a legislature from making its citizens as safe as possible.
One of the criticisms of the list, though, is there's no due process as far as how you get on, how you get off. The standards, the U.S. government has really never fully articulated the standards. So if somebody finds himself on a list and they appeal to Commissioner Shira or the Board of Firearms Review, what would be their burden? The list is kind of a black box. You don't know what's in it. You don't know what's behind it. So who would have the burden in appeal in that case?
I think it's a fair question, and it's one that we're working on, Paz. On the other hand, I would rather, in light of Paris and in light of what happened in California, I think the appropriate thing is to do as soon as possible is to deny access to weapons in the United States to individuals who are here or on those lists. But I also would say to you that I think it has to be a rigorous appeals process. Certainly, if you have the wrong person or the person simply has the same name, that's something that could be resolved, I think, relatively quickly and administratively. If there's a broader question about why they're on the list, then we're going to have to, we clearly will have to cover that. But what happened in Congress last week was that the NRA flexed its muscles once again and denied the ability to get a political consensus to make Americans safer, at the same time that people are talking about denying whole cross-sections of individuals access to our country, either for refugee status or visitation. It doesn't make sense.
Can you or the commissioner tell us how many people are permitted at the current time to have, how many people have permits?
Do you know off the top of your head?
In the last month or so?
I can get that for you. I don't have it off the top of my head.
We'll be happy to share that with you. I mean, I haven't seen, a year ago I saw the data. I haven't seen it recently. We'll get it for you.
So anecdotally, there's been a surge. But that may be just
There's almost always a surge around one of these events, including non-terrorist related. For instance, Oregon. States across the country saw a spike there. What I don't want to see is a spike that also carries in people who are on various watch lists that we should be protected from.
Why not go a step further and say nobody who has a visa should be able to purchase a gun?
Well, there are different types of visas. I mean, there's different types of visas. What I'm saying, but if those people are on one of these lists, if they're on a terrorism watch list, then they absolutely should be denied that right. If they're here as a student, for instance, that may be a different category. If they're the spouse of an American citizen who's used a visa to get here to set up a household, I mean, there are different situations, and so what I want to get down to the heart of, and what I think, what people in the Congress, many people in the Congress, not yet a majority, want to do is to make sure that we're denying access to those folks who are already in our country, who we've identified represent a real risk as opposed to a made-up one or perceived one.
Connecticut State Police said today that they made 3 threatening arrests in the last week regarding threats, perhaps terrorist activity. Do you have fear that there could be someone radicalized in this state who might be ready to carry out an attack?
I have no personal knowledge that would lead me to that conclusion. However, I mean, I have visited a mosque that was fired on. So, and whether that ultimately is determined to be a form of discrimination or not, or an act of terrorism or not, is yet to be determined. But I do know that in all societies there are a level of people who are going to commit crimes.
So are you more concerned about activity against Muslims more so than non-Muslims in this state?
Well, so far the activity that we've seen has been directed at Muslims, not the other way around. But I want to say that, having learned really for the first time that in 2,043 cases, people on the watch list have been allowed to permit and been permitted to obtain guns, is something that I find very concerning and disconcerting that the Congress is unable to act. So, you know, you're a governor for a reason. And I think paramount reasons to be a governor or be in government is to protect your citizenry. That's clearly what the commissioner's charged with. Quite frankly, it's clearly what I'm charged with. I am frustrated that our nation is having the wrong debate. And I'd like to see us focus on the right one.
All right, we're going to step away from that news conference live from Governor Dannel Malloy, where he said by executive order, those on the terror watch list will not be allowed a firearm permit here in the state of Connecticut, that pending federal approval. Of course, we'll have full coverage tonight on that at 5.